So last week I hurt my back.
I broke my back.
What do you mean by that? You
My
broke
back is broken.
a vertebrae or what portion?
Spinal.
But now I'm pretty much back up to at least 95%. So in this video I'm going to show you my process for recovering from a back injury as quickly as possible, including my full first workout back. I filmed the whole thing. And I'll show you what a dramatic difference that made on that day. But first, yes, back injuries still happen. There's no such thing as an exercise that makes you bulletproof, not even Jefferson curls. In fact, bulletproof vests aren't even bulletproof. The correct industry term is, in fact, bullet resistant. And every piece of body armor comes with a rating that indicates exactly what sorts of threats it'll reliably stop. For example, the level 3A soft body armor police officers wear at all times during the day has been successful in testing pretty much all pistol caliber threats except the hottest revolver loads, but it's not going to do much against most rifle calibers. Level 3 and 4 rifle plates will protect against mini rifle threats, but not against fragments going up into the face or areas that are uncovered like the armpits or whatever. And there's still stuff that can just straight up penetrate them anyway, right? So there's no such thing as bulletproof, just varying degrees of resistance. And that's the perfect metaphor for injury resistance too, right? You've got some people who push various exercises claiming that they'll bulletproof this or that body part, and then other people who are going to push back on that narrative saying that no exercise can completely prevent injury and we can't reliably predict injury, so just lift however you want and don't worry about injury prevention, right? But the first is like somebody claiming that their body armor will protect against Gauss rifles from Stalker. And the latter is like someone saying that since no body armor reliably protects against all threats, cops might as well just not wear their vests on their ships, right? The reality is, while injuries are always a possibility, we can dramatically increase our resistance to them and exert a whole lot of control over what can and can't injure us. For example, while I still get back injuries sometimes, like last week, it's much less often, and I've more or less eliminated the dumb stuff, like sneezing while bending over to tie your shoes, or trying to move an awkward piece of furniture or whatever. The stuff that they say is just going to get you when you're in your 30s or 40s, even if you lift. Well, yeah, life stuff like that pretty much just is not an issue for me. For me, it's always something that involves strenuous exercise, and even there, I've managed to eliminate a lot of the dumber stuff. Like, for example, back in CrossFit back in the day, I managed to hurt my back so bad I couldn't walk for days doing just 75-pound thrusters. And when I do get injured, it's less severe. I haven't had the literally can't get out of bed thing in a couple of years. It can make it get hard to get out of bed, right? But it's still possible. I think there's a little bit more reserve capacity in place, if that makes sense. And actually, I just got off the phone with a client today who kind of gave me the same observation that he still gets injured from time to time after doing some of this spinal flexion stuff, but it's not as severe. And I've talked to a lot of people that say that. Just you're going to get injured, but it's not going to be quite as devastating. But anyway, um, when I'm talking about back injuries here, I've never personally gone to the doctor or a physio and gotten a specific diagnosis. And of course, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a physio. So obviously, this is not medical advice. But I'm assuming what I'm talking about in my experience, and probably in a lot of lifters' experience, if it doesn't get that severe, so we're talking about muscle strains here. There's no numbness or stuff like radiating into different areas, which might be a sign that there is something, nerve related. I'm assuming my stuff is mostly like muscle strains or whatever, and that's probably, the most common injury a lot of lifters get. So that's what I'm assuming, but obviously this whole video is not medical advice, so don't take it that way, right? Disclaimer here. Anyway, I'm not going to be too precise. We're just going to say back injuries here, right? And that's kind of what I assume we're talking about. And obviously, I'm talking about like low back, not a lat pull or whatever, right? Anyway, if you think you actually might have like a disc injury or something like that, something more severe, obviously go get checked out by a qualified professional, right? Anyway, so I do still occasionally get back injuries, and it's happened often enough in the past that I've got a pretty good system in place for fixing the issue very fast. So today I'm going to take you through that system, including the first workout back. I filmed the whole thing, so I'll show you that in a little bit. If you know what to do, you can speed up your recovery very dramatically. Something that could linger for months can actually be solved in weeks or even days. So I think it's going to be really helpful for you to see my process. Like a lot of people will feel that dreaded pop, right? And think it's the end of the world. I know I sure did when I first hurt my back on on the leg press, like one of the stack load, not even a plate load, like a stack loaded leg press of all things when I was like 18 or 19. I thought it was the end of the world and let that linger for almost a year, thinking like that was the end of having strong back, right? Um, but it really doesn't have to be that big of a deal. Even if you can't walk the next morning, which is scary, but it's actually not necessarily that big of a deal. And yeah, I let that first one limit me so much as a kid. And young people are supposed to have supposedly amazing recovery abilities, whereas now as an old dude, and I'm supposed to be on TRT according to all the pill mills you see today promoting TRT, right? But it barely slows me down, as you'll see in this video. And on that note, common theme I found in fitness is what you do is way more important than how old you are. To an extent, obviously, this isn't going to apply to somebody who's 80. But anyway, let me briefly explain how we got here as far as me getting injured. So I hadn't done conventional deadlifts in a year, maybe even more, just because it takes too much time to set them up. You got to load up all those plates, warm them up, whatever. But I wanted to try them just to make sure I didn't completely forget what they were. Now, that by itself wouldn't be so bad. I've lifted after a long layoff before, but I've also been working a lot on hip mobility recently, and well, long term, that's going to be actually great for back health, very beneficial for back health. In the short term, increasing your range of motion with strenuous mobility work can make you more vulnerable to injury. That's something I found. So if you try to lift heavy without being fully recovered from mobility work for that area, that can definitely make you a little bit more vulnerable. So as a general rule, I try to do heavy pulls first and then do mobility work relevant to that area so it has maximum recovery time before lifting heavy again. That's what I usually do. That's definitely how I program for others. More on that at the end. Um, but unfortunately, I'm a lot better at making other people do things the smart way than actually following my own rules 100% of the time. So I deadlifted for the first time in a year, um, after just doing a pretty intense hip mobility session a couple days before, not being fully recovered from it. Sorry, guys, long day. Anyway, I figured I'd just go ahead and take it easy, play it by ear, not push too hard. And honestly, that probably would have worked, except that my baby was sleeping. So I had to put the weights down really gently. So on my last rep of the workout, my low back got a little bit unhappy with me. It did pop. It wasn't quite injured, but it was like right on that edge. Definitely not happy. I kind of saved it, but kind of didn't. Um, Now my rule is, as you'll see in a bit, whenever the low back gets injured, I just stop the workout. And a lot of times I'll be more or less okay the next day if I do that. You can actually sometimes dodge it, right? Um, right. But it wasn't happy with me, but it didn't feel like super injured, right? Not the full on like pop pain, all that stuff. Um, but because it wasn't quite injured, I kept on going and did some other posterior chain work, like Nordic curl stuff. Not probably not the best idea, but I did it anyway because I don't always follow my own rules, right? Because it wasn't quite injured, right? So I thought I could get away with it. And it wasn't happy with me the next day. Still not like the can't get out of bed thing. Not full on, but definitely not where it's supposed to be. Definitely not ideal. And that persisted for a couple days. Um, so then I decided to skip a few of the steps I'm going to share with you in just a bit and just jump into the recovery workout immediately because it wasn't full on injured. That's what kind of gets you when you think, okay, it's not that bad, so I can take some shortcuts. That's where it gets you, right? So anyway, I decided to do the rehab workout, right? So I went through some exercises that I normally do. I'm not going to spoil all of them, but they actually do include one hand deadlifts, which we'll get to in a bit. That might surprise you, but I'll give you a full explanation. Anyway, that was actually working. That was actually working fine. I'd actually worked up to 315, one hand deadlifts, no issues yet, right? So it was kind of working, even though I'd broken a couple rules, but at this point I kind of have to break a lot of rules in succession, and then some bad stuff has to happen for that dreaded pop, right? But bad stuff happens, right? What's Murphy's law? If anything can go wrong, it will, and Mr. Murphy has a way of showing up. So anyway, what went wrong this time? How did Murphy's law kick in today? Well, my kid was asleep again. That's kind of a common theme in this little story here. So I had to keep from slamming the bar yet again. And I was just using hook grip, just to stay in practice with hook grip because I hadn't worked on it in a long time either. And of course, I pulled 315 with my left hand, which is a little bit weaker. Probably not enough chalk, and my grip started to slip. So I grabbed the bar with my other hand to try to set it down gently and not wake up the baby, right? Pop. That was the straw that broke the ego lifter's back right there, right? Um, at that point, I knew, okay, I finally, like, kind of like in Chernobyl. Like they didn't like break one rule, they didn't break two rules. They broke so many rules, and finally, pop, you get the nuclear meltdown. And now they're dudes with gas masks stuck to their faces, like hopping around, like roaring at you like lions and the invisible things, right? Anyway, yeah. So at that point, I decided, you know what? Let me just go through my actual steps correctly and rehab this thing right. So that's what I did, and it worked fine. So let me show you. I'll put up a graphic of the steps, but they are rest, walk uphill, train assisting muscles, which are the hamstrings, the glutes, and the abs, light back work for a pump, heavy back work like pulls from the floor, and then we have a bonus secret step, which I'll share later in the video. All right, so I think I probably put up a graphic here. Hopefully I did in editing. But anyway, let's go through these. So the first step is to rest. Now I've heard some people say that it's important to keep moving, even lifting after back injury, after you feel that dreaded pop. I disagree with that. So after a back injury, I think some days of resting as much as possible are necessary, or at least advisable for the fastest possible recovery. It doesn't have to be a long time, like you're not going to be on bed rest for 2 weeks. It could be as little as one day. Most times 2 days is plenty for me, but at least a day of moving as little as possible is a good idea. Um, I think the folks that emphasize the importance of keeping moving and just trying to get immediately back into it and never stopping, I think they have good intentions. They're trying to keep people from being afraid that they're going to be crippled for life or whatever after they feel that dreaded back pop, because that does happen, you know. People feel like that, right? But I think these people have kind of gone off the deep end with the psychosocial model, if you know what that is, where fear of movement is the ultimate evil, and people just need to be encouraged to keep moving no matter what, because God forbid they develop any like negative feelings about movement, right? Like way too much emphasis on what's going on in the head, and maybe not quite enough of the bio part, right? So what prevents fear of movement better, in my opinion, is effective strategies to recover from injuries. Even those dreaded pops that again do unfortunately make many people think it's the end of their lifting career or even their real career. It gets way less scary when you know that you have an effective plan for recovering from it quickly through experience, right? So in my opinion, that quickest possible like full recovery does start with some rest as complete as possible. You get that pop in your back, call the workout. You're done. Maybe do some upper body stuff that doesn't require loading the back at all, but do not do any more back workout that day. Go home and rest. If it's difficult to get out of bed the next day, don't do that any more than you have to, at least. Now, some of us have responsibilities that can't be ignored, like kids, right? But that just underlines how important it is to build up your resilience to injury and then also learn effective strategies for back recovery early in life, which means just lift till you get the injuries, learn how to fix them, and then you'll have that strategy. Like, thank God I have that now that I have 3 kids. Like, if I didn't know what to do, I would be in trouble right now, right? But thankfully, I know what to do, so I'm right back at it, right? Anyway, get as much rest as you can the first day or two. Don't try to do any rehab exercise or anything at that time. Just rest. Don't worry, it's not going to last that long. Maybe a couple days tops, but don't try to skip steps here. Take the rest. Don't take any like ibuprofen or anything that'll interfere with the body's natural healing process. If you're inflamed, which is what that stuff will reduce, your body is doing that for a reason to try to heal. So let it do its thing, right? And that applies to ice as well. Just let your body do what it needs to do. Don't rest, but don't bother with the ice or whatever, right? So when it gets even a tiny bit better, the slightest improvement, I'm talking like it goes from taking like 10 minutes to get out of bed to just 2 minutes to get out of bed, right? That's improvement, right? That's all you need. Doesn't have to be much improvement at all. Just any improvement you can see, okay, it's a little bit better. You can measure it's like noticeably better. That's all you need. Let's go to step two, which is uphill walking. I mean, I guess I could have called just flat ground walking a step, but we'll just call it uphill walking because we need to get there, right? So warm up to the point where normal flat ground walking is possible. It doesn't have to be completely comfortable, just like decently possible. It's not going to be completely comfortable, maybe some pain, but you can do it, right? Then start walking uphill. So stairs will work here. Not that much fun. I like going for hikes over like steep ground, ideally broken ground, so you get a little bit of movement variability. That helps the best, and it's just better for your mood too to be out in nature or whatnot. Um, that really helps to loosen everything up. So what I'm probably going to show here, if I get to in video editing, is the steepest slope of one of our favorite hills that me and the little girls go up. It works, very well for that purpose. Anyway, start with flat walking, work into the gradual slopes, and then go as steep as you can tolerate. Anyway, so do some walking uphill, and usually afterward, at least walking will be more or less comfortable. You won't necessarily be able to bend over or run, but walking at least should be fine after this, right? So that's your step two. All right, so step three is the day after. It's probably going to be the day after you do your uphill walking. You should be ready to reintroduce resistance training. So I actually filmed my whole first session back, so I'm going to show you that now. We'll start with an assessment to just show you my starting point in terms of mobility, okay? All right, so to start with, I'm just going to show you guys a little baseline assessment. So I can walk, I'm good on most regards. I can even jog a little bit, but bending down is kind of tough. So this is going to be my full forward fold as deep as I can get right now. Yeah, it's about as far down as I can get. Now, if I were going to try to deadlift, I couldn't really comfortably get down to the bar. It's kind of a struggle. Now, what I could do is reach down, brace up, and pick something up with one hand. That's what I've been doing to pick pretty much everything up. Or, I can get down on one knee and pick stuff up like this. But as far as actually trying to just bend over and pick up a bar, that's pretty painful right now. Okay, so my first exercise that I like to do to get back into resistance training after a back injury is actually, believe it or not, the Turkish get-up. They just make a quick, dramatic difference in my ability to move. Why? Well, I've always found the training exercises that work the glutes, hamstrings, and abs help with back recovery. So this is one movement that just checks a lot of boxes in terms of that step three of my plan, which is working those assisting muscles. And I'm not saying the Turkish get-ups are necessarily a great option for hypertrophy in all these muscles, but they definitely get used, right? If you're getting a hamstring cramp, it is probably doing something. I'm not saying it's going to grow massively, but it's doing something. That's kind of all you need in this capacity, right? And additionally, we know that bracing, creating a lot of stability is helpful for rehab, right? The Turkish get up does all of this and brings you through a lot of movement, but in kind of stable brace positions that the back is generally going to be comfortable with. It actually checks a lot of the same boxes as the like McGill stuff, like bird dogs that squat you and people like that, but with some actual load on it, right? I think especially for stronger people, more load can be helpful with rehab exercises. A lot of the really light stuff just doesn't do that much. In some cases, I'll just start by doing the movement unweighted till I feel better. But in this case, I was able to go ahead and start with 75 pounds and work up. I haven't done these in forever, but I was able to hit, 75, 95, then 135 without issue. Not too bad for no practice and an injury, right? So I'm not saying you have to do Turkish get ups, certainly not this heavy, but it is one of the most efficient ways for me to get some stimulus for my assisting muscles as per my third step, right? Now, walking lunges are also a great option, various sit up types, whatever sit up type you like. Even hip thrust, that's your mileage may vary on there. That's always worked well for me. I know my wife does not like using that in that capacity, but it may or may not work for you. Your mileage may vary with hip thrusts. But the idea is still like hamstrings, glutes, abs. Feel out what works for you. It's not necessarily going to be exactly the same thing for every person, but the principles should help you to some extent, right? But anyway, yeah. Um, Turkish get-ups are very helpful for me to feel better very, very, very quickly. In fact, for me, they've been almost too effective at making me feel better immediately. In the past, I've actually gotten myself in trouble by doing Turkish get-ups as a warm-up and then pushing my back a little bit too far right afterwards because I felt better than I was really. Um, but anyway, you can try them out, start light, use other movements that also accomplish the same objective, right? It's more the principles than exactly what I'm doing here, right? So after that general warm up of the assisting muscles to get the back feeling better, I did my first direct back exercise, which of course is 45-degree back extensions. And here we're still getting some of that glute and hamstring work that we want for step three, but I guess now we're on step four. Anyway, generally speaking, when coming back from an injury and directly training the affected area, we want to use a movement that emphasizes the shortened portion of the movement to get a lot of blood flow in that area. That's what a lot of the science guys kind of neglect to mention. Like that's why maybe we don't need to cut out the shortened portion of everything, and maybe we should incorporate some of those movements and keep them in our routine a little bit, right? It just getting a lot of blood flow in that area without putting a lot of stress on it is really helpful. And 45-degree back extensions are just wonderful in that role. I think Ben Patrick emphasizes them, and that's why it's a fantastic rehab movement for your back, as well as just a good back exercise to have in your routine anyway. So I did a couple sets of them. For the back rehab purposes, I like to kind of squeeze the antagonist muscles a lot, meaning the abs. I try to really contract my abs and pull myself as deep as possible into the bottom and then come up. That just helps me to go ahead and get a better pump and just restore range more quickly. And I'll use the abs to contract to give a little more resistance to the back as it goes up just to get more pump. That might not necessarily help that much for hypertrophy, but it is very effective at just getting your back feeling better more quickly, right? Okay, so after getting a good pump in my back and feeling a lot better, I was ready for my first pull from the floor. And for me, that's almost always going to be a straddle stance one hand deadlift. And that sounds like a weird choice, but it actually makes sense. They allow you to stay in a much more upright and brace position, but also to brace your free hand on the offside knee in that more vulnerable lower position. But they still allow and or require bracing, which of course is helpful for back recovery. And the load is a little bit offset, which I think helps the QL, which is implicated in a lot of back pain too. And here I'm going to use a little bit of scientific jargon, get it shit together. The QL is involved in spinal movement, obviously in the sagittal plane. And what am I? Never mind. I was going to say something I shouldn't. But like that means like basically front to back, sagittal plane. I hate talking about this stuff, but whatever. Anyway, we front sagittal plane meaning like a deadlift, front to back movement. The QL does a lot of that, but it's also involved in the frontal plane, which you'd think frontal you'd move forward, but no, frontal plane's like side to side, as in a side bend. So it helps the spine to move side to side in the frontal plane as in a side bend, right? And we don't do a whole lot of training there. So I think having a little bit of lateral loading helps it to kind of figure out what's going on and lock in a little bit. That's my explanation. May not be 100% accurate. You may not like the language I'm using here, but either way, one-hand deadlifts are a really great first pull from the floor to get the back working again. If for no other reason, then try it with a back injury. If you're going to try to pick something up, you're probably going to have to do a one-hand deadlift like that. Brace on your knee, reach down with one hand instead of reaching down with two. Try it out. Anyway, so that's almost always going to be my go-to to get the back working again. So I worked up to 315, and of course, baby was asleep again. He sleeps a lot. It's a baby. But this time I used straps so that we wouldn't have any grip issues, and this time it worked the way it was supposed to. We got to learn from our mistakes, right? So I felt a lot better after that. I think you'll see me doing a pike stretch here and you'll see some improvement there. And again, you don't have to do exactly the movements that I'm using, although I do think that the one hand deadlift is a very good option here. But find something that allows you to actually lift weight, with some bracing without pain. If you don't want to do the one hand deadlifts, a partial deadlift, so that you don't get down to an area that hurts you might be a good choice. But anyway, these one hand deadlifts had me feeling pretty good. And eventually I was good enough to start doing some very light conventional deadlifts, which, believe it or not, are harder when you have a back injury. And at first these didn't feel amazing, so I had to kind of play with the technique to make it feel good. But with enough reps, it started to feel better, and eventually I was even able to kind of transition the set into some round back stiff legged deadlifts, almost like a Jefferson curl with just no deficit, right? So after that, I went ahead and retested my mobility, and I found that with effort, I could actually go ahead and push into a palms to floor pike. And that's not bad for about a 30-minute workout. Like you saw, I was barely able to get to my knees, touch my knees, and now I'm doing palms to floors, which is fairly good mobility, right? So anyway, I called it there, enough for the first workout in, and I went about my day, grateful for the ability to move again, right? Now, I mentioned a secret sixth step, and that is multi-day fasting. So fasting, especially like actual long fasting, not like skipping breakfast, I don't know if that does much, but multi-day fasting reduces inflammation and in theory promotes healing via growth hormone and stuff like that, right? Your mileage may vary, but in theory, right? And I've certainly found fasting to be extremely effective at helping to restore mobility after a back injury. However, there's some nuance to it in terms of when to do it. So just like the other options to reduce inflammation, like ice, ibuprofen, stuff like that, I don't think it's a good idea to start fasting immediately when you get injured. Give the body a couple days to do its thing, or at least one day, I would say. What I think makes more sense is to start fasting to reduce inflammation at the time when you want to start reintroducing movement. So, for example, you can continue eating normally during your rest period that I recommended at first, and then start fasting on the day when you do your uphill walking, and then continue it into your first resistance training day. That's what I did here, and it worked really, really well. You don't have to try it, but I'm putting it out there because I found fasting helpful. If you do want a full guide to fasting as well as other helpful strategies for building an easy, like busy, life-friendly strategy for getting and staying lean, you can consider buying my ebook, The Anti-Fragile Diet, available through the link below, but you don't need it to fast. You can just not eat. I think I can make it a little bit more comfortable and easy for you and maybe give it a little bit of insight, but like your body, you can do it, right? You don't need anything from me to not eat, right? I don't want to gatekeep, but I do want to offer resources if you are so inclined. Anyway, um, so yeah, just to update that, the plan worked very well as it usually does. Like I didn't get around to making this video for a minute. As you can see, I had a beard at that time, and now I don't. But yeah, a week later, I was able to do barbell rows, RDLs, and even Jefferson curls. Actually, I didn't go too heavy. I just went up to 225, and the depth wasn't amazing, but I still did 2 sets of 10 at 225, and that's not terrible for a week out from the sort of back injury that a lot of people legitimately think will cripple them for life, get them hooked on oxy, and then, you know, God knows where we go from there, right? So, not a bad outcome, right? And again, this is not intended to be an exact guide. You have to do Turkish get ups, you have to do fasting, you have to do one hand deadlifts, but I think the general principles, general steps are going to serve you well. And if you want to experiment with, my specific implementations, I think you may find they work well for you, but the principles are kind of key here. And I wanted to show you this, my take, just not just to give you a specific plan for back injuries, but also as a way to showcase a more practical approach to both movement optimism and also unconventional lifting techniques. In the case of movement optimism, like, yeah, I want to show you the feel good stuff, that a back injury is permanent, and that you can go from being crippled to doing, fairly high level stuff again. Um, but I'm not trying to be a motivational speaker here, I'm not trying to give you just good vibes or feelings. I'm trying to give you a plan, you know. Because honestly, having a plan, having the cold, hard, dry knowledge of what to do in a situation can honestly give you a lot more optimism and courage than any kind of motivational speech ever could, right? That applies way outside of lifting to every domain. A plan, training, just having some kind of general idea of what is going on and what to do about it is going to kick mental toughness's teeth in 9 times out of 10 when it comes to responding to adverse circumstances. Like the guy who knows what's going on is going to do so much better than the guy who sat in cold water trying to be tough. Like just knowing what to do really helps, right? So that's more what I'm trying to convey than a good attitude, right? Um, I think you get way too much talk about attitude, toughness, and like general nonsense, and not enough information. So I'm trying to be a little bit more informative here. And then as far as the unconventional training, some of the stuff I'm using here is a little bit off the beaten path. But you can see exactly why I'm choosing these options over more conventional options, right? And it doesn't mean you have to make the same choices I am, but you can see the rationale here, and that's kind of the important part. And that's kind of my niche, or the niche I'm trying to go for. Or at least one of them. I guess I probably have a number of them. But I mean, yeah, I like unconventional lifts. Yes, I want to explore the benefits that these exercises have that are largely slept on by a lot of the fitness industry. But I want to be more analytical about them, more objective, make them prove their worth, not just go doing something different for the sake of being different. And when you look at it that way, some of them really, really do have a lot of slept on value, but you have to make sure you're being objective about it and be confident that, yes, there's value here. And I don't just like doing this because it's fun and it gets views on Instagram. Not that there's anything wrong with fun and getting views on Instagram, but if you really want to understand the benefits of unconventional techniques, you have to make sure you're being rigorous and honest with yourself about it, right? And if that approach appeals to you, trying to tap into the benefits of some less common lifting techniques, some of the ones you've seen me apply, not just here, but obviously in other videos, where they legitimately offer advantages, but still continuing to use the tried and true where that makes sense. Trying to put a lot of the functional strength, the mobility back into effective hypertrophy. God, I butchered that. Whatever. Lyle McDonald says hypertrophy, so you can say it however the hell you want, right? I don't know. Anyway, you get what I'm saying. Putting functional strength and mobility back into hypertrophy and strength training instead of just treating these things like rival cliques that have to sit at different lunch tables in high school. If that approach sounds good to you, you might be interested in my coaching. So I've been doing one-to-one coaching for a couple of years now, and that's been great. It's very rewarding to help motivated individuals work towards lofty goals that are a little bit off the beaten path, or honestly, kind of a lot off the beaten path. In some cases, I'm now working towards some that are like very ambitious, very cool, and I don't even know if it's possible, but it'll be really cool no matter what. I'm sure these guys are going to get to some cool places. But anyway, um, so I'm continuing to take clients in that track, the one-to-one track. but the numbers that I can work with there are going to be obviously somewhat limited, and a lot of people are looking for a more budget-friendly option. So I've been working on something to check those boxes. That's actually a lot of what I've been doing over the last few months, where my uploads got inconsistent. That and obviously taking care of the new baby who's featured so heavily in this video, right? Um, but anyway, I've been doing a lot of work setting up programs in Trainerize for a template-based coaching service. Like there to make the programs, I've already got over 80 tutorials up in my library there, which I've tried to be pretty detailed because I know this may be the first time you've seen a lot of these because a lot of these are fairly unconventional. So I tried to be as detailed as possible. So I actually filmed a whole lot of videos in these couple months. I just didn't upload all of them. But anyway, whereas in like one-to-one coaching, we are going to start with a call, and based on that, I'm going to make a one-off program designed to your specific specifications. In this case, you're just going to choose from an assortment of pre-made programs tailored to a variety of ability levels and goals based on the most common characteristics of programs that I typically give to my one-to-one guys. But then you get to customize it by making substitution, say adding from a list of accessory workouts, which I think are pretty cool. And you can make it suit your needs in that way. And then, of course, you still get the regular features of online coaching, the feedback on your workouts, messaging, which voice and text, actually, now that's an upgrade from the program I was using. I'm still using. I have two programs now, TrueCoach and Trainerize. TrueCoach is what I was using for one-to-one. Now we're using Trainerize for the template method, but if I can use either one for one-to-one. Honestly, they both work. That was unnecessary to talk about here. Anyway, um, you still get those benefits, the form checks, and I think that's important because I like to use a lot of more esoteric exercises that really do benefit from form checks and feedback. Like Jefferson curls, for example, typically don't get learned quite correctly just from a tutorial. And you'll also actually get group chats with everybody else doing your program on this, so you guys can talk to each other, not just me, so you can compare notes and learn from each other and talk about what you'd like me to add, subtract, or change, which is cool because I don't know everything. I'm not the final authority, and if you guys come to a consensus and you say like, hey, maybe your assumptions need to be revisited, that's good for me. So I think that's valuable. So where it's not all just coming, top down from me to you, but you guys get to talk amongst yourselves about what's actually working. But anyway, yeah, so the only things you wouldn't get from one to one in this method would be a fully custom, like built from the ground up program and then the calls, right? And I'm open to exploring calls or like group Zoom calls if there's demand for it as kind of like an add-on or something. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But anyway, if you don't have any extremely specific goals or programming requirements and are okay with giving up a little bit of the more like personal relationship that obviously comes with long phone calls, then this will be a good way to get a lot of the same value at a much 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 more affordable price that I think will work for a lot more people. And even in that template option, I anticipate we're going to get into some pretty fun esoteric stuff like specialty programs and whatnot. I already have one that's set up called Jefferson Curl Mastery. This is a year-long program designed to take you from your very first introduction to light Jefferson curls with a 15-pound dumbbell to being able to push the exercise harder as a like heavy strength and hypertrophy exercise the way that I do now, using a variety of assistance exercises and variations to kind of perfect the technique and work out any weak points along the way. It's based on what I've done myself and what I've used with my one-to-one guys, and I think it's going to be pretty helpful for a lot of people. And I'll make more in that vein, but I just figured I should actually get some folks in first and figure out what there's most interest in before I start going in random directions and then I find out you guys want me to go in another direction, right? So yeah, on that note, I've got I think a good array of base programs to start with. I know there's going to be demand for more, and I'm happy to make more programs according to demand. I can't make everybody who's doing the template option their own completely unique program, but I want to make sure there's at least something that'll work well for almost everybody or at least with some customization, right? And if you really do need something that's truly unique and one-off, then obviously I'd be happy to make that for you as a one-to-one client, right? But I'll try to accommodate as many needs as is feasible using the template service because ultimately I want everybody who puts their trust in me as a coach in any capacity. And that's a big thing. We all take our gain seriously, so I don't take that for granted. Anyway, I want everyone who puts their trust in me to get what they're looking for, to be happy to recommend it to a friend, or at the very least, even if it doesn't work out perfectly, say, hey, it wasn't a good fit for me, but I can see it being a good value for someone, looking for that sort of thing. That's my goal here. I'm trying to make sure everybody is getting what they're looking for here. Like the way I see it, if I'm going to be in the fitness industry making money from fitness, That means helping people to get more out of exercise, and I mean, I guess diet, but especially exercise. That's what the fitness industry should be for, not advertising products for the most part. I'm extremely grateful to my sponsor, Barbell Apparel, for making a great product that I legitimately wear every day. I wore long before I got the sponsorship, something that I can demonstrate the value of organically in all my content. They've been great to me, and I'll happily advertise their products in every single video, since this is legitimately something I find a lot of value in. But apart from that, there are not going to be a ton of products that it makes any sense for me to advertise. Maybe a few equipment manufacturers here and there as I get the opportunity to incorporate their equipment into my training more, but there's not going to be a lot of advertising products for me in the fitness industry, I don't think. So my bread and butter is going to have to be like helping people who like exercise, who like the more advanced, esoteric, off the beaten path, but also more rewarding exercise, want to explore those more advanced tools to go ahead and meet their goals and get the benefits of some of these less common exercises without running into trouble. That's got to be my bread and butter in the fitness industry, right? So if you're interested, if you have questions, not sure whether one-to-one or the template approach are a better fit for you, you can DM me on Instagram. That's probably the quickest way to reach me. Or you can email me via the contact form on the website through the link to buy my books. Or if you just know you want to go ahead and sign up for the template option, you can just sign up directly through the link. In my link tree, you'll see a link to sign up for that. So the earlier you get in, the more influence you're going to have over what programs and features I prioritize first. So go ahead and get in there, get the group chats rolling. I think that's going to be an excellent feature for you guys to talk to each other, brainstorm what you guys want me to work on, changes you want me to make, and just learn from each other. I think it's going to be a cool feature, right? And obviously that applies to template. If you do one-to-one, I'm going to make sure you get whatever you want anyway. But of course, that side of things is going to be growing slower, just to make sure that I'm prioritizing like the personal attention and relationship building. Um, no homo, like sound, but yeah, no, we should be able to say that relationship building, right? We've all, watched Lord of the Rings, the gentleman or read the book even. The gentleman in the novel are all building relationships throughout the course of the novel, and that's a wonderful thing. And we shouldn't have to say anything to talk about, you know, men bonding with other men, and women are free to apply as well. Just my audience is mostly male. I've had female clients, not nearly as many as men, because obviously my audience is um, super majority male. But either way, works fine. It's it's online, so it's not like my wife's gonna have any issues with it. I'm not trying to be Mitch Hooper over here. I would definitely not take female in-person clients because we're not trying to get into any kind of Mitch Hooper situations here. Was that too soon? But anyway, I hope you guys found this video helpful, and didn't mind the long commercial plug. I know not everyone's going to be interested in coaching, and I totally get that. You don't have to be. I don't expect you to be, right? But I did just give you a lot of valuable info for free, and the commercial that you just listened to is at least something that you've never heard before. It's not Raid Shadow Legends. It's not the Buy Land in Scotland thing. So I would appreciate if you go ahead and sit through it and still give me a like and a comment for the algorithm, and still make sure it gets to all the people who are interested, especially if you use this to get your back squared away. But just if you want me to be able to make more content more easily, your help would be much appreciated. All right, thanks for watching, and from here on out, I'm going to try to stick to the one video a week schedule. I was kind of on like semi-paternity leave while also just getting this trainerized thing set up, but now I'm going to try to get back to it at least once a week. And the next week's video tentatively involves reasons to stay natural according to J.R.R. Tolkien. So I hope you guys like that one. All right, thanks for watching, guys.